Hi guys, it's me, HD, and welcome to race 16 of the 2024 Formula One season and the return to Baku in Azerbaijan for what hopefully will be yet another very competitive and exciting weekend in Formula One, something that we've had for the last few races now, given just how close things have got at the front of the field. And of course, many things still yet to be decided, thankfully, in this Formula One season in terms of who's going to win the Constructors' Championship. In the Constructors' Championship, we've only got, I think it's 39 points separating the top three teams. And then on the driver's side, Max Verstappen still comfortable-ish in the lead, but of course McLaren still very fast and catching Verstappen and Red Bull. So like I said, many things still to decide in this Formula One season, and this weekend it is looking so far in terms of the pecking order quite interesting indeed. Quite a bit different from what I was expecting. Not entirely different. There are some things this weekend which are not a surprise, and I'll get into those particular teams and why their pace this weekend isn't surprising. But yeah, the field still, even though it's a bit different to what we saw 2 weeks ago at Monza, it is still competitive. We still are going to have probably at least a 2-team, maybe 3-team fight for pole position, which is, still great. I don't think it's going to be as close as what we saw at Monza, because Monza, obviously, shorter racetrack and 80% of it is flat out. So it's always going to be closer there than it is here in Baku. One of the longest laps on the calendar here in Baku. Pole position probably going to be like a 1 minute 42 or 41, something like that, which is quite a bit longer than Monza, which we saw 2 weeks ago. But of course, we have got just under 1 hour and a half to go until qualifying gets underway in Baku. Currently, there is an F2 sprint race going on in Baku. The weather is okay. It's kind of sunny and cloudy. The sun looks like it's coming out more as we get later in the day in Baku. So yeah, weather-wise, it's absolutely fine. There doesn't seem to be that much wind either. In fact, by the looks of it, there's not really any wind at all. So yeah, weather is absolutely fine. And we'll see how the teams and drivers get on when qualifying does get underway. Hope you guys are doing well. Of course, I haven't spoke to you guys since the day after the Italian Grand Prix. And I hope, the little break we've had of, what has it been, 10 or 11 days. Hope you guys had a good break, and hope you guys are doing well. Now we're, in the middle of September. Only got 3 months left of this Formula One season, and after this weekend, it will be 7 more races to go after this weekend in the season. Of course, next weekend we are in Singapore, and then after Singapore there is a 4-week break until the US Grand Prix in Texas. So yeah, still plenty of time to go in this Formula One season. But I hope you guys are doing well no matter what time zone you're in, part of the world you're from. Hopefully you're all doing as well as possible, given whatever circumstances you're going through. And as well, hello to Efron, who usually tunes in. Great to see you all. Just wanted to quickly say that, as usual, there is a poll running at the top of the live chat where I've asked you guys, who do you think will take pole position today in Baku? And the options I've put in the poll are, I think, the 4 most likely options to take pole position based on the data we have seen so far this weekend. And those drivers are Sergio Perez, Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, and Charles Leclerc. Out of those 4 drivers, who do you think takes pole position in Baku? It's certainly going to be interesting to see who out of those 4 does end up on pole. And it might not be someone that you were expecting, let's say, coming into the weekend. Let's say if it was a Lando Norris or a Max Verstappen. So, yeah. What we'll do, of course, in this qualifying build-up is go through the results of practice 2 yesterday, which, of course, took place, I think, the session, started at the same time that qualifying starts today. So conditions representative of what we'll see in an hour and 20 minutes or so. So yeah, we'll go through the results of practice 2, get into the data from practice 2, and then out of that, I'll give you, of course, my predictions for the qualifying session, and we'll get into a couple upgrades from the teams, including one maybe key upgrade for the world champion that may just make a key difference this weekend and maybe to the overall result of the Formula One season. So, let's get into the results of practice 2 yesterday, and it was Charles Leclerc quickest at a 1:43.4. Very quick lap time, but that lap time I think has already been beaten in practice 3. I think in practice 3 they did the best lap time of the weekend so far. Let me just have a quick check to see if that is true. And it is. George Russell was quickest in practice 3, and he did a 1:42.5. So pole position will be probably a 1:41 point something. Probably a low 1:41. Maybe a 1:41.2, 1:41.3. I'd be very surprised if anyone did a 1:40. That would be quite an incredible lap time. So yeah, Leclerc ended up quickest only by 6 thousandths of a second. Sergio Perez this weekend has been flying. And I know it's Baku, his favourite track, but Perez this season, as we know, has been pretty bad. And this weekend, suddenly, he has just turned up and he's the Perez of old, suddenly. Saying that, though, last couple races before this weekend, Perez, I think, has been performing a lot better. At Zandvoort and Monza, personally, I think he performed as well as he could have in that car, given who his teammate is. He actually wasn't that far behind his teammate at times at Monza. So, in terms of his own performance, I think Perez has been doing absolutely fine since the summer break. I don't think you could complain at all about Sergio Perez's performance. But here in Baku, suddenly he's turned the lights back on. And yeah, looking very, very strong. And without doubt, he is a contender for pole position. There is no doubt about it. Was in the top 3 in practice 1. Was looking quick in practice 3 as well. And in practice 2, even though he didn't end up quickest, in reality, he was really the quickest. And I'll get into why that is in a moment. Lewis Hamilton ended up 3rd. And then Carlos Sainz 4th. Piastri 5th. Verstappen 6th. Verstappen, though, definitely could go quicker. He actually topped practice 1. Lance Stroll 7th. Hulkenberg 8th. Russell 9th. Russell had to change his power unit in practice 2. So he missed, I think, the first half of that session. And Oliver Behrman stepping in for the banned Kevin Magnussen, who, of course, will be back in Singapore. Oliver Behrman, P10, but Behrman did crash in practice 3. It wasn't a big crash. He'll be fine to participate in qualifying, but yeah, was a bit of a disappointing accident for him. But his pace looks decent, I would say. And maybe you could say pretty good, even. And for the rest of the field, Tsunoda in 11th and Alonso P12. Alonso not looking great, but I mean, Baku has never really been a great track for him. Albon 13th, Colapinto 14th. Look how close Colapinto able to get on lap time. Once again, very impressive performance from Colapinto so far this weekend. And as long as today he doesn't make a mistake and he gets the most out of that car, I think Colapinto could surprise people today. Valtteri Bottas then 15th, and then Ricciardo, Lando Norris 17th. The reason Norris in 17th is because on his quick lap, he was severely held up by Pierre Gasly going through those final couple kinks before the very long straight that takes you to the line. So that's why Lando Norris ended up in 17th. Gasly 18th, Ocon 19th, and Zhou Guanyu, absolutely despicable pace. As I think a slight disconnection there for the stream. Apologies if your stream did buffer for a second, but it appears we're all good now. Anyway, let me just go back to this top 10. So, if you look at the top 3, that top 3 isn't really that representative of what the pace truly was yesterday. And the reason I say that is because Sergio Perez, he set his lap time halfway through the session, which normally, people do, and then they move on to their, their race simulations where they fill the car with fuel, and then they do loads of laps to see what the car is like with fuel on board and all of that. Leclerc did his best lap with a few minutes to go in the session, so had a lot more, there was a lot more rubber on track for him. The track would have been in definitely better condition for him than it was for Perez, and the same goes for Lewis Hamilton as well. Track was in much better condition for him. So, in reality, Sergio Perez, when you add in that context, Sergio Perez was the quickest driver yesterday, and Red Bull were the quickest team yesterday. And I do believe that Red Bull have the best car here in Baku. So again, when you add in that context of when Leclerc and Hamilton did their laps, it helps you understand that, Perez and Red Bull are seriously quick. But even though Leclerc did that lap on, a better track, Ferrari are still quick. Don't get me wrong. They've got good pace. They're just not as quick as Red Bull. And this practice 2 result is a bit misrepresentative, again, because of when Leclerc did his best lap. It doesn't quite, again, represent what Ferrari's true pace is. Because from this, you would think Ferrari are right in the fight for pole position, when I'm not necessarily sure that's maybe the case. Again, we'll see later in qualifying, but I'm not quite sure, again, that's the case. And Mercedes, topping practice 3, Hamilton getting this close in practice 2. Again, Mercedes did their best laps a bit later in the session than the others did. So that is what is making Mercedes' pace look better than it actually is. And we also have to remember in practice 2 that Lando Norris, if he had done his best lap without being impeded, he probably would have been at least in 4th place and probably, a couple tenths of a second off the top. And his lap, he was doing his lap like half an hour before Leclerc did his lap that took him to the top. So, again, we have to remember these things because these things can skew the data a bit. But let's get into the sector time data just to understand why certain teams are quick and why certain other teams, say like McLaren, are not as quick this weekend as maybe we would have expected. So in Sector 1, you've got, 90-degree corners and long straights. No real surprise that Ferrari and Red Bull are top of this sector. Mercedes, I've got to say, doing pretty well in this sector, but McLaren, 4th best in Sector 1 and a tenth of a second down on Ferrari. Sorry about that. Now, we'll see this more in the middle sector, but the reason I think McLaren are not quick this weekend, or let me rephrase that, they're not as quick as we would have expected, they're not looking like absolute certainties for pole position, is because this track, in terms of the type of corners we have, plus the long straights, it doesn't suit the McLaren car. Obviously, there's quite a few corners here, but what the McLaren car likes is medium to high speed corners. They don't like slow speed corners. This has been known probably for the last year or so that this McLaren car just doesn't go as well in slow speed corners. It's been something they've worked on for the last year. It's something they've got better at, but it's still, I guess you would say, a weakness for them. It's, it's not their strongest area. If this track, with the long straights, if you had the long straights, but the corners were as high speed as Silverstone, McLaren would be dominating this weekend, despite the long straights. But because the corners are slow, there isn't really any fast corner here, and there's barely a medium speed corner here, I would say. That's why McLaren aren't showing that stunning pace we saw at Zandvoort, or stunning pace we saw at the Hungaroring, because there isn't any high speed, medium speed corners for them to take advantage of. That's why, obviously, Singapore in next week, there are some medium and high speed corners that they'll be able to, take advantage of. And plus that track, there is, no real, I mean, you've got a DRS straight in Singapore, but straight line speed doesn't matter in Singapore. So, of course, next week they will be definitely stronger, will McLaren. But here, again, that's the reason I believe McLaren's pace is not quite, the best, is because the corners here just don't suit that McLaren car as well. But they're still in the fight. They're still close. They're just not the quickest as they've been most of the time in the last few races. But for the rest of this first sector, I mean, Sauber looking pretty good, surprisingly good. Haas looking good, but you're not really surprised their pace. Neither is Racing Bulls. Would have expected a tad more from Aston Martin, maybe a tenth of a second more in this first sector, given that their car, normally in slow speed corners, is pretty good. Williams, ninth best, bit of a surprise there, them being that far down. Colapinto, though, ahead of Albon. And you'll see with Colapinto, he was actually ahead of Albon in Sector 1 and Sector 2. The only reason Albon ended up ahead of Colapinto in Practice 2 is because Albon, I'm pretty sure, got a better slipstream through that final sector, which of course is completely flat out, because Albon ended up gaining back like a tenth of a second on his Argentinian teammate. And then Alpine, I have not a Scooby-Doo as to why they are 8.5 tenths off the pace in just the first sector. That makes no sense to me. But it's Alpine. And then with the middle sector, I mean, the middle sector is the most important in terms of cornering performance. But again, it's all really slow speed corners. And Red Bull, not really that much of a surprise to me now that Red Bull, their car clearly handling better this weekend. And this track clearly suiting their car better than what we saw at Zandvoort and at Monza. Red Bull better than McLaren, and actually comfortably the best of any team in the middle sector. A tenth and a half better than McLaren and Ferrari and Mercedes. And if Red Bull can maintain that advantage in the middle sector and be quick, let's say as quick as we would expect in Sector 3, which is pretty quick, and then be matching the pace of whoever in Sector 1, then this is Red Bull's pole position to lose. Because in the middle sector, they, yesterday, were clearly the best team. And by the looks of it, at times today, they were, in Practice 3, they were pretty strong in that middle sector. So that's really where Red Bull are making up the time. And again, with McLaren, tenth and a half down on Red Bull, and overall in these slow speed corners, they're losing basically a quarter of a second per lap that's why McLaren are not quite on the pace this weekend. Because again, slow speed corner performance for them just isn't a strong suit. It's something that, I mean, they could probably improve on for next year's car, but it's not something that you're going to see them improve on between now and the end of the season. Because from what I know, I don't think are going to be bringing any more upgrades. Maybe a small upgrade, but nothing big enough to affect their, slow speed cornering performance. So, this is going to be a slight issue for McLaren, going forward for the rest of the season. There are tracks, say, that have these types of corners that, might affect McLaren. Obviously, the Mexico City track has plenty of slow corners. So, this is something to keep our eyes on with McLaren, and whether it affects them enough to the point where, maybe not in the Constructors' Championship, but in the Drivers' Championship, it prevents them from, coming out on top in that particular championship. And then Ferrari, third best in the middle sector. I'd say probably to be expected their pace in the middle sector, but I do feel as though they may be able to improve on that. Maybe by half a tenth, but yeah, a tenth and a half off I don't think you could really argue that much against the pace of the Ferrari in the middle sector. And for Mercedes too, I don't think you could really complain, that much about their pace there. Franco Colapinto, though, what an incredible speed by him in the middle sector, the best of the rest out of the field, or the midfield. And, he was, I think, a tenth of a second quicker than Alexander Albon. Brilliant speed from Colapinto. And I know Williams brought an upgrade a couple races ago, but I wasn't really expecting it to showcase its worth here. So I am surprised that Williams is so quick in that middle sector, because I was expecting them to be a bit lower down than that. Aston Martin, again, should improve. They shouldn't be behind Williams in this middle sector, not at all. Haas, okay. Racing Bulls, I'd say okay. And then a big drop-off to Sauber, who, have a terrible car. We know this. But Alpine, this track should be better for them than Monza, but their pace looks even worse somehow. And it's remarkable because they've got two drivers in the car who are both pretty good around this track. So I don't really get why the car is just this bad. To be nearly a second off the pace in the middle sector is quite bad. It really, really is. And then the final sector, you can't really read anything into it, because the final sector is literally flat out. And in terms of who ends up quickest in this final sector, yeah, your straight line speed overall does matter. If you do have a slow straight line speed, obviously you're going to be, quite slow in the final sector. But really, these times you're seeing, it really comes down to whether you've got a slipstream or not in the final sector. Because, if you look at Sauber, for example, they were, way off in the middle sector, but then suddenly are very competitive in Sector 3, probably because they got a nice slipstream down the straight. And then, with other teams like Red Bull, probably didn't get, a good enough toe. That's probably why they were, 3 and a bit tenths of a second off the pace in the final sector. That's probably why Lance Stroll ended up being quickest, because he probably got a very nice toe, to the finish line. So, again, with the final sector, you can't really read into, who was quickest and who wasn't. Because, again, a slipstream in that final sector can massively skew the data and massively skew your impression of who actually was quick in the final sector. The only thing I will say is, in terms of what to expect today in the final sector, is the usual teams who are quick in a straight line, Red Bull and Ferrari powered teams, they should be the teams to look out for. And of Williams, of course, as well. They should be the teams to look out for in the final sector. But if you're, an Aston Martin or a McLaren and you get a slipstream of dreams at the absolute perfect time, then that can completely override the lack of straight line speed you may have on your own. So it's about right place, right time a lot of the time, really, in that final sector. But let me just quickly go back to the top 10 practice results. Because before we get into my predictions, I just want to go through what I think the pecking order is for qualifying. In my view, Red Bull are the quickest. And I don't just think that for qualifying, but I think probably in race conditions as well, Red Bull, are the are the quickest team. They look, ever since practice one, they have looked like the best team consistently. So, and we know from the last couple of years, guys, that Red Bull, if they are this strong on a Friday, they tend to go on and dominate the weekend. Now, I'm not saying they're going to dominate the weekend because we don't know what's going to happen yet, but most times, again, rather than not, Red Bull, when they start the weekend this strong, they end up going on to get the result they need. So, quickest team for qualifying, I would say Red Bull. The second quickest team, I think, will just about be McLaren. And the reason I say that is because I don't think Ferrari's pace is as good as it appears. Leclerc, we have to remember, is an absolute monster around this track. So, he's he's just, it doesn't matter what car you put him in, he's gonna put in just an amazing performance in whatever car he's in because he's just so strong at this track. But Lando Norris yesterday was compromised with his lap. His lap would have been good enough, definitely, to put him in P4. And with Leclerc in practice 2, his lap again was done like 20 minutes or 30 minutes after Norris's, and obviously went quite a bit quicker than Lando was going to go because he had a better track for him than what Norris had. So I don't think Ferrari's pace is as good as it may seem. I hope it's as good as it seems because, this Ferrari resurgence is really giving the season even more life than it already has. But I just don't believe that Ferrari have got that pole position level pace for qualifying today. And you have to say, lately in the races, Ferrari have been very impressive. They've consistently what's the word I'm looking for? They've, impressed us, but they've, I guess, gone over and above what we expected from them in the last, say, 3-4 race weekends. But if you look at qualifying, I know Leclerc started on pole at Spa, but in most of the last 6 or 7 qualifying sessions, Ferrari have not been really that good at all. If we look even last weekend, not last weekend, the last Grand Prix weekend in Italy, Ferrari were 4th and 5th on the grid, which wasn't that bad. Obviously, they went on to win the race, but their pace probably, I think they probably could have done more than that. And I mean, Leclerc, to be fair, did have, I think, a steering issue that may have cost him a position or two on the grid. And then, if you go look at Zandvoort, again, their qualifying effort was quite poor, and then they were very good in the race. Again, a lot of qualifying sessions, really, in the last 2 or 3 months, Ferrari, most of the time, have been quite disappointing. So, That's how I think it will play out. I think Ferrari will be, I'm going to say, third best team here in Baku. So yeah, Red Bull quickest, I think. McLaren just about second, ahead of Ferrari third. Mercedes, I don't think have as good a pace as what they've been showing. I think they are the slowest out of the top four teams. They're still close, though, with McLaren and Ferrari, but they're just not quicker than them. I just don't believe they are. I'd be very surprised, to put it that way, if Mercedes ended up in the top three of the grid. Very surprised. And then after the top teams, I would say Aston Martin, fifth best, purely because I think their speed in Sector 1 and Sector 2 is good enough to have them ahead of teams that may be very quick in the final sector. So I would go Aston Martin fifth, Haas in sixth, and then seventh, I would probably go with probably Williams. I'd say seventh, and then Racing Bulls eighth, Sauber ninth, and Alpine in 10th. That's what I think the pecking order is here for qualifying. And now I've gone through that, let me get into my top 10 predictions for qualifying that you may be, especially with the gaps, you may be quite surprised by. So here is my prediction. I think Sergio Perez for Red Bull Racing will take pole position in Baku, and he will be followed up a couple tenths of a second behind by Max Verstappen in the other Red Bull. If it does end up that way for Red Bull, I think Max will be super happy with that, especially knowing that Perez is so quick, because if Max is able to find a way past Perez then on Sunday, which, I mean, he should be able to, if you know what I mean, then, Max knows that he will be able to score quite a bit of points ahead of Norris and McLaren if it does end up this way. But of course, you never know what could happen. But yeah, I think Perez on pole, Verstappen second, and then half a second back, I am going Lando Norris in the McLaren. The reason I'm going Norris and everyone else over half a second away is because in the in the first two sectors, I think Red Bull have the best car, and I think clearly the best car. And then when it comes to the final sector, I think Red Bull, with their straight line speed, I think it's efficient enough for them to be too quick to be stopped in that final sector and overall for the lap. And also, Sergio Perez is absolutely on one this weekend. So we have to acknowledge that, really, with Perez. We can't just say, nah, he's going to be 8th or 9th on the grid because, that's what he's been doing most of the season. This weekend, he is absolutely a contender for pole. And even the race win if, things do go wrong for Max Verstappen. Of course, we'll have to see what happens with him. But yeah, Lando Norris, I think, will be third, which is still a good qualifying position for McLaren, considering they don't have the best car here. Leclerc, I'm going in fourth, with Russell fifth, Piastri sixth, Hamilton seventh, and Sainz in eighth. The reason I've got Hamilton and Sainz on the fourth row of the grid is because those two drivers don't tend to be that great in Baku. I know Lewis Hamilton has won here before in 2018, but he has never consistently been the best driver for his team around this track. In 2016, obviously it was Rosberg, and then if you look when he was teammates with Valtteri Bottas, most of the time Bottas was the better driver here in Baku. And then since Russell's became his teammate, Russell has been, I'd say, 50-50 with Lewis. But if you look at this season as well, in terms of, how good George Russell has been in qualifying compared to Lewis Hamilton, Russell, has been clearly better. So that's why I got Lewis Hamilton down as seventh. And for Carlos Sainz, he's never really had a great Azerbaijan Grand Prix weekend. It's had a couple decent results, but never anything that special. So that's why I've got him down in 8th place. But overall, from 3rd to 8th, I think it will be very, very close. Aston Martin, 9th, with Lance Stroll, who we do know loves this track quite a bit. And just behind, I think, will be Nico Hulkenberg, yet again, getting another Q3 appearance. But guys, let me know in the live chat, who do you think takes pole position in Baku? Will it be Perez, Verstappen, or will McLaren take pole, Norris or Piastri, or will it be Leclerc on pole? Maybe even Mercedes-Benz. There is a poll running at the top of the live chat. Let me know out of those options who you think takes pole, or if you don't think any of those options take pole, then make sure to comment it in the live chat. Before we move on, make sure to smash the like button if you haven't already. Likes, of course, do really help the channel out. So if you could do that, that would be great. And make sure to subscribe for more content like this. And by the way, I just want to say one more thing. Rooks in the... If he is in the chat, if you are listening, just to let you know that when you post the Discord link, you need to copy the one that I've got in the description because I've had to change the link. So if you go to my description, Rook, and take the link from there and then paste it in the chat, then yeah, that link should work because I think the previous link stopped working. So yeah. Anyway, good to see you all, by the way. Anyway, before I come on to your comments in the chat, just want to get into a couple things before your comments, and those couple things are upgrades, and only a couple upgrades for the teams. Red Bull have got a new floor body, and what it is a revised geometry for the floor tunnel on the Red Bull. Now, since the Italian Grand Prix, Red Bull said they were going to go, look back to the data and they were going to make changes to the car, whether it was an upgrade or setup. And what I believe in terms of why they're so quick this weekend, I think, one, the track is suiting them better. I think there is no doubt about that. But also, whatever setup changes they've made, combined with this new floor, is helping them as well. So Red Bull, we'll have to see if this is permanent, obviously in Singapore, but I think for now, they have found a better way in terms of at least the setup of the car, which from Red Bull's point of view is great, because if they were not able to find that, then it was McLaren's championship to lose. But from what I'm seeing this weekend, I think Red Bull are really bouncing back in 2024, which again, from their point of view, is great to see. And then the only other upgrade is for Mercedes, which is a new rear corner. Mercedes lately are just really trickle-feeding upgrades to the car. They're not bringing any big upgrades. Maybe they've got one big upgrade left. We'll have to see when that is. But yeah, Mercedes, I don't really see Mercedes improving that much between now and the end of the season. I think what they are now is what you're going to get with them for the rest of the season, where some weekends they'll be quick, some weekends they won't. Maybe they'll be able to get a race win or two. It just depends on the race weekend, really, with them. But anyway, let me come back to here and get the timer back on the screen, because we've got less than an hour to go until qualifying begins in Baku. Just over 45 minutes to go until qualifying is underway. And yeah, looking forward to it. And I know I've been maybe a bit ambitious with my prediction with Red Bull, given their form lately, but like I said, I do believe that they have found a better way with their car. They said they were going to try to, and that I think even Max, after the last Grand Prix at Monza, let me just adjust myself here. Yeah, after the last Grand Prix at Monza, Max even said that they know, you know, where to go in terms of setup after, reviewing and going through the data. And if this is the result of that, then, I mean, this could save Red Bull and Max Verstappen's championship. I'm not saying they're going to be this quick for the rest of the season because I think, a big reason why they're looking so quick here is because McLaren are a bit weak this weekend because the track isn't quite suiting them as well. So, that is also playing a role into, into the way things are happening. But, you know, again, it could save Red Bull's championship because with Red Bull, really, how they do on a race weekend, it depends on how good are they on a Friday. If they are as good on a Friday as they've been this weekend, then normally they end up going on to win. But if they're as bad as what they were at, Monza, for example, where they were clearly the slowest out of the top four teams, then they're always going to struggle. So, it really depends with them on just how they start the weekend. Because if they fundamentally start the weekend off and they're strong, then they don't really have to make any real adjustments to the car. But when they don't start off well, that's when they have to start making serious setup changes and alterations, and then that's where you go into the unknown really, because your car may get better, it may get even worse. You don't know when it comes to the setup. So that's really, again, with Red Bull, that's what it comes down to, I think, for the rest of the season is if they start the weekend on a Friday as strong as they have this weekend, then Red Bull will win at least the Drivers' Championship. But if they start race weekends off where they are, over half a second away from whoever's quickest, then it's a massive uphill battle, like we saw 2 weeks ago in Italy. Anyway, let me come to your comments in the chat and go through some of them. Good to see you all, by the way. Hope you're all doing well. Mushtak earlier says we want Mick back. I mean, maybe you do, but I'm not sure that many people want Mick Schumacher back on the grid, I have to say. As far as I'm concerned, he had his chance and he didn't take advantage of it. So, yeah. Astra saying no Piastri pole option. I would have voted for that. Okay, biased, but still, the reason I didn't put him in as an option is because McLaren, I don't think, have pole position pace. But if they are somehow going to get pole, it won't be Piastri. It'll be Lando Norris, because Lando, 80% of the time is quicker than Piastri in qualifying. And normally it's in the races where Piastri, gets into the thick of things. Bottle Job FC, I love your name, by the way. I reckon Leclerc gets pole. He's brilliant around Baku, and it seems Ferrari is very competitive. I hope they're as competitive as it may seem, but I just don't think it is, because we've seen it a lot with Ferrari in the last, say, 3 or 4 months, where after some Friday practices, they've been quick, but then qualifying's come and they've ended up being miles off the pace. So that's why I don't think Ferrari will be on pole. If they do end up with Leclerc, though, in fourth place, that's still a good result for them because there's still then good opportunities to finish on the podium. And let's be honest with Ferrari. I mean, even though, yeah, they won at Monza, they weren't the quickest team at Monza. McLaren were. We have to remember that. And, you know, in terms of the championship, even though Ferrari are, I think, 39 points behind Red Bull, I still don't think we can really sit here and say Ferrari are title contenders because it's still not clear whether they've actually got the pace, you know what I mean, to be regularly first, second, third. So, yeah. I mean, maybe they do, but we'll have to wait and see, I think, a bit more evidence on that. They obviously Ferrari brought a big upgrade at Monza 2 weeks ago. Still, I don't think we're going to see the effect of that upgrade this weekend because the corners this weekend, it's not really about how good you are aerodynamically. It's more about the mechanical grip of the car around a street circuit. That's really what it's more so about. And Ferrari's mechanical grip is actually pretty good. It's not bad at all. It's arguably better than McLaren. It's, like I said, it is pretty good. But in terms of the aerodynamic side, we're going to have to wait till Singapore next week to really see whether that upgrade at Monza did actually improve the car. So, I'm very excited to see qualifying next week to see if Ferrari truly, from an aero perspective, because, I mean, this track and the last track at Monza, they're not aero tracks, to be honest. Once we get to Singapore, I'd be very excited if Ferrari are, as quick as they were last year in Singapore, where they were the quickest team, obviously. So, yeah, we'll see with Ferrari. But Leclerc, without a doubt, as you said, he is brilliant around this track. And also, he is probably right now the best. I wouldn't say the best driver in Formula One, but he's the most informed driver in Formula One right now, I would say Leclerc. If you're looking at it since, say, the Hungarian Grand Prix, then I'd say Leclerc's been the best performing out of any driver. Willifon says, I hate Baku. I agree. I don't like this track. I mean, I know, there can be chaos and that makes things a bit exciting, but you can't have a naturally good race at this track. It's not possible. The only way to have a good race here is if you get a race like 2017 or 2021 where there's, safety cars, red flags, and just chaos in general. That's the only way you get a good race in Baku. You can't have a good race naturally in Baku. And that's why, if they took it off the calendar, not that they will, because I think it's on the calendar for another 10 years. But if they did take it off the calendar, I would not miss it. I would not miss it one bit because it's not a good track. There are plenty of good tracks out there that we've been to recently that are not on the calendar that I think would be better. Portimao in Portugal, way better track. And obviously Istanbul Park in Turkey, way better track. So, yeah. But the reality is, Baku is on the calendar. Yeah, I think for another 10 years. or 8 years, something like that. um, Bottle of C says Alpine are really struggling because they're running a monster style wing and are just looking or losing a shitload of time in the corners. That would explain why, and I hope that is the reason. But I mean, still looking pretty slow. Alpine, even in the final sector, their pace still wasn't that great. Jamie Todd, good to see you, says or asks, is next season the biggest of Hamilton's career? This could be where we say he is done at the top level like Vettel became. Is it the biggest season of Hamilton's career? I'm, I'm not sure, to be honest. Um, that is a good question. That is a really good one because looking back at the past, I don't think we've ever really sat here and said like, "Oh, this is a really big season coming up for Lewis Hamilton." So yeah, I think you'd probably say it is the biggest season for Lewis, and if he gets beaten comfortably by Leclerc, and when I say comfortably, next season's calendar I think is 24 races. So if Leclerc outqualifies Lewis by like what 15 races to 9 or more, let's say 17 races to 7, and in the races Leclerc regularly finishes ahead, then I think, yeah, at that point, you would have to say that, yeah, Lewis is done at the top level, but whether that will happen, we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see. I do think that if Leclerc maintains his current level, I do think Leclerc will be better than Hamilton next season. But again, whether he'll be better, just about, or comfortably better, we'll have to wait till next season because this season from Hamilton, I wouldn't say it's been a poor season because, I mean, Lewis has won 2 races this year. So, we need to remember that. But it definitely could have been a lot better this season for Lewis Hamilton, given how regularly he's been out qualified by his teammate. So, yeah, we'll have to wait till next season. But like I said, if Leclerc keeps up his current level, I think I think he beats Hamilton because let's be honest, guys. If you were to compare Leclerc to Lewis Hamilton from the start of 2022 to now, I think you would have to say Leclerc's been the better driver. Um, just about, I would say, not clearly, because 2023, I thought Lewis Hamilton was very good that season, and still had some very good races in 2022. But I think if you were to compare Leclerc and Hamilton from the start of 2022 to now, I think just about you would say Leclerc's been better. So based on that form, you'd think Leclerc would be better than Hamilton next season, but it's not always as simple as that in Formula One. Right, let's find some other comments here as we've got just over half an hour to go. Dylan Aviation, can I ask why you think Red Bull take the top 2? One, because whenever they start the weekend strong, they always go on to be even stronger and normally, I mean, dominate at times. But I do believe genuinely their car is better with the floor and setup changes they've made. And this track is hurting McLaren, their main rival, a bit. So, when you add up all those elements, that's why I think Red Bull will lock out the front row. Astro says, for his predictions, Piastri pole, of course. Leclerc second, Norris third, Hamilton fourth, Sainz fifth, Verstappen sixth, Perez seventh, Russell eighth, Alonso ninth, and Ricciardo in 10th. And Astro saying, although I also wouldn't be surprised if Perez crashed out in Q3 as usual for him. Well, for him, normally, normally he crashes out before Q3, but I don't think that'll be. I don't think that'll be the case this weekend. I'll just repeat this quickly because I can see Rook is in the chat now. By the way, hello to you. Yeah, Rook. Just to let you know that from now on, when you post the Discord link in the chat, you need to go and copy the link that's in my description right now, because that is a new link that I've generated, because the other one I think stopped working. So yeah, if you post that link from now on, then it should work. Astra says 16th race already. Yep, I mean, but 20 years ago we'd be looking at 16th race of the season would be like what, the third to last race of the year, maybe even penultimate race of the year. It's quite incredible how we're still got a quarter of the season left. And the Astra says, guess it is. That used to be full number of races back when I started watching F1. Glad there's more races this year, given how much the season has improved. Yeah, that's the thing with having so many races, is it's great when you have, it's so competitive as it is now. But like last year, it was like hell, wasn't it? Really having, what was it, like 22, 23 races? Because I mean, in the second half of the season, we were just waiting for the season to end, really, because we knew what was going to happen. So, yeah. Bottle Job FC says Baku is just a glorified Sochi Autodrome, 90-degree corners galore. It's got that feeling, and I mean, that's my biggest criticism with new tracks is the amount of 90-degree corners, because 90-degree corners, for one, the driver can't have any effect really on the performance in a 90-degree corner. They can't brake a bit later than others. You can't be a bit braver than others by going a bit faster through, say, a high-speed corner that isn't quite flat. It's just a boring corner, and there's so many of them in Baku. And I mean, that was my biggest criticism of the Sochi track was 90-degree this, 90-degree that. And when it comes to new tracks, the less 90-degree corners there are, the better the track will be. Because 90-degree corners, as well, when it comes to racing, you can't gain anything under braking in a 90-degree corner, and you can't follow close through a 90-degree corner either, because of the concertina effect of, when you exit a corner, the other guy accelerates first, and all that stuff. So it's just that's really why I don't like this track, because there's no real flow to it. But before I get on to any more comments, let me just quickly post a link in my on my community tab, another link for the stream, so we can get some more people here. And then I'll come back to your comments in just a moment, and then I'll probably read your comments for probably another 20 minutes, and then we'll get into a couple final things before the qualifying session gets underway. Come join us here to watch along qualifying in Baku with multiple teams fighting for pole. So there you go. So yeah, we'll get through some more of your comments, and then we'll get into qualifying. I think we'll say another 15 minutes, because I remember I need to get through the teams and just whiz through them quickly before qualifying. Right. Let me just scroll down a bit. Will F1 says Hamilton has had 4 or 5 good races this season. That's it. Yeah, obviously the 2 wins. Hungary, that's probably the 3rd one. What other one would we say? Canada. You can maybe put in there. And then, I mean, Spain as well. So, yeah, probably, yeah. At least 4 good races. But, I mean, for Hamilton, 4 good races in 16 or 15 is nowhere near good enough. Nicholas says, okay, that's good to know. And do you think there is any chance Leclerc wins the championship? I mean, all he has to do is win the next few races. Or he's asking, I think, Serugara that question, but I'll answer it as well. Leclerc, he's performing at a very high level, and that's all great, but until we get to Singapore, I can't answer whether Leclerc is a championship contender or not. Because if we get to Singapore and we have clear evidence that those upgrades Ferrari brought 2 weeks ago have worked and they have improved the car, then I'd probably say at that point, given Leclerc's performance level, I think you'd have to say Leclerc, yeah, is a title contender. But until then, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, if Leclerc can win this weekend and then in Singapore, again, Ferrari, those upgrades clearly showed they've worked, and then Leclerc wins again there, then, yeah, absolutely game on. But we need to wait and see still. But I'd still say it is between Verstappen and Norris, and I'm still favouring Verstappen because Lando still isn't performing well enough, I'm afraid. He's just not getting the best out of the car still, which, if you can't do that on a regular basis, then you can't win the championship. Simple as. But McLaren have imposed team orders. And I was going to talk about this more tomorrow, because obviously tomorrow I am going to be live for the race. Just to let you guys know, I'll be live 2 hours before the race begins at 10 a.m. UK time. For obviously the usual build up to the race, and then the watch along. And I will be joined, of course, as usual, by Niblo, my co-commentator. Yeah, I was going to talk about it more tomorrow in the race, because obviously that's where it matters. But yeah, McLaren have now issued team orders, and Piastri is now to try when he can, when it's suitable, to help Lando Norris, preferably in a way that doesn't hurt Oscar's own performance. But we'll have to see what situation arises that, that those orders may need to be used. So yeah, we'll see on that. Obviously, another piece of news is that Adrian Newey has signed for Aston Martin, and he will begin that job in March of next year. Obviously, he'll be paid handsomely. I think he's even um, is he now holds a stake in the team as well. So yeah, Adrian is set up nicely financially, no matter what happens on the track. I mean, he's already set up financially really well anyway, given what he's been doing for the last 30 years or so. Um, but what do you call it? Yeah, great news. I was hoping he'd go to Ferrari, but he didn't want to go. I think mainly because he doesn't want to move to Italy, which is absolutely fine. And you have to remember, guys, given the age that he's at, which I think he's in his 60s now, this Aston Martin job is probably gonna be his last as like a you know uh chief designer or whatever you want to call it in Formula One, and he'll want to spend that obviously close to home. So it's not a surprise that he's decided to remain in the UK. I was hoping he'd go to Williams because I thought that would really shake things up in Formula One if he went to Williams. But Aston Martin, it's a logical choice because even though, in terms of development, Aston Martin have been failing in the last couple years, if you look at the finances and the resources that Aston Martin possess with the new wind tunnel, all of that stuff, they have got the means to win a world championship. All they need is the quality, and they've got now the best designer probably of all time in their team. They've got Fernando Alonso, who is still, I think, on his day, an elite driver, and I think this season has mostly performed well. I think the race where he hasn't been quite at his best, I think, it's been largely down to his I guess depression with just how bad the car has become compared to what it was like at the start of the season, where Alonso was able to fight with Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, and even Red Bull to an extent. Um, so the decision Adrian has made is a good one. As long as Aston Martin can fix or figure out why their developments don't work and fix that correlation from the wind tunnel to the track, and Adrian can, work his magic, there is no reason why Aston Martin can't be world champions between now and the end of the decade. Whether it's with Fernando Alonso as driver or maybe even Max Verstappen. But we have to remember that, I mean, for next year, Adrian officially won't be able to affect next year's car until he starts in March. And of course, that's when the season starts. So, in terms of the fundamental design of the Aston Martin car next year, he can't affect it officially, but I'm sure he will have discussions with people at the team, Dan Fallows, who I believe still is at the team, as to what to do with the car. I'm pretty sure there isn't any, contract that can possibly exclude conversations being had between people at Aston Martin and Adrian Newey as to, you know, what the design should be of the car. So I think there'll be some influence from Adrian on the car we see at the start of next season, but not entirely. But hopefully, if they figure out rather this correlation issue with their upgrades, then whatever Adrian thinks needs to be brought to the track to improve their car, if that does come to the track and it actually works for them, then maybe next season we'll have 5 front-running teams, which is the most I think we've ever had in Formula One if that was to happen. Normally you get maybe at the absolute most 4 front-running teams in certain good years in F1. But yeah, 5 front-running teams would be absolute madness, really. But we have to remember, though, obviously, them employing Adrian is not purely for 2025. It's really for 2026 and beyond. But what we have to remember is in 2026 and beyond that, Formula One is not going to be an aero. It's not going to be an aero regulation type series anymore. It's going to be mainly about the power units, at least for the first couple years. So if Honda, who are going to be powering Aston Martin in 2026 and beyond, if they don't get it right and they're way off, then it won't matter what Adrian designs because that car won't be quick enough to win anything. So it really comes down to 2 things, whether Adrian and his work, whether it succeeds at Aston Martin. One, if the correlation issues between the wind tunnel and the track are fixed, which they should be, given the amount of money being spent at Aston Martin, they should be able to figure that out. And there is, quite a few smart people working at that team. So yeah, they should be able to figure that out, whether it's next year, the year after, whenever. But if they figure that out, then the only other thing that needs to go their way is the Honda power unit in 2026 has got to be at a world championship winning level. And if those 2 things go Adrian's way and he works his magic, then like I said, there is no reason why Fernando Alonso or Max Verstappen, whoever is going to be in that car, there's no reason why they can't win the championship in an Aston Martin. But we'll have to wait and see. That's really a lot of what it is with Aston Martin, I think, for the next couple of years, is just waiting and seeing. But it should be fun to wait and see how it all plays out for them. Hello to Francisco, by the way. Good to see you, mate. Let's find some other comments here. Probably, I'll try and find a couple more comments before we move on. Astro says Verstappen has such a huge points lead, hard to see it being surpassed. I don't think there's enough races left, or that Red Bull car is bad enough for anyone to beat Max now, although hoping. I think if Red Bull are as quick this weekend compared to McLaren as I think they are, and Max, let's say he wins the race and Norris ends up finishing in 3rd or 4th, then I think at that point, I think the championship is almost over. Not entirely over, because you never know. Obviously, Singapore is a weird track. Max Verstappen, for example, hasn't had a smooth run of things in Singapore the last couple of years. So you never know. Lando could have a massive points gain there. So I'm not going to say the championship would be over. But if Max wins this weekend and Lando finishes third or lower, then it's pretty hard to see how Lando wins the championship, even in that McLaren car. Given that, again, after this weekend, there will be 7 races left. So, yeah. And Lando, he'll have to give himself a chance. He'll have to gain at least 10 points per race, starting from Singapore on. And even then, if you count it down, let's say Max wins this weekend, Lando finishes third, the gap goes up to, I think, 72 points if that happens. If Lando then from Singapore until the end of the season gains 10 points per race, Max would still win the championship, I think, by 2 points. So, yeah, it's going to be pretty difficult for Lando to win the championship if he doesn't outscore Max this weekend. But I said in my last podcast episode that for Max, the aim has to be to beat Lando in one of these 2 races, either this weekend or next weekend. Because if he does that, it makes it hard then for Lando, given the amount of races left, to win the championship. Especially given Lando's performances in the races, which haven't exactly been... If you're a McLaren fan, you can't exactly have confidence in them, where you can be like, yeah, Lando definitely will win this championship. So, yeah. If Max wins this weekend, then I think in his mind, I think he'll think that the championship is, say, 90% done for him. But, one final comment I'll read out before we go on to the teams, and a couple final things before the session begins. I'll just read out this final comment from Bottlejob FC, who asks a good question. Where do you think Norris ranks amongst some of the weakest championship contenders in F1 history, like Massa, etc.? He's definitely the weakest title contender that we've seen in the last 10 years. No doubt about that. I mean, the title contenders we've had in the last 10 years, we've had what? Rosberg, Hamilton, Vettel, Leclerc, Verstappen. That's it, really. And, I mean, Lando is not the level of any of those drivers. So, well, he's on the level of Leclerc, purely because Leclerc hasn't won a championship, but you know what I mean. But yeah, I'd say, yeah, probably Felipe Massa in 2008 was probably the last driver you could think of who was maybe as weak a title contender. But Felipe, I know, in 2008, the competition, it was strong, the competition in 2008, but the quality of the grid was nowhere near as good, I think, as it is now. I know you had Hamilton, Raikkonen, Kubica, a young Vettel, Button, Webber, but I think the quality of the grid now is better than it was in 2008, 100%. I would honestly say the quality of the grid now is the best we've maybe ever seen in Formula One. So the point I'm trying to make is, yeah, Norris is probably the weakest title contender since Felipe Massa in terms of maybe talent, you could say. But Felipe, if you go and look at his title campaign, I think Felipe did the best he could in most races. I mean, he wasn't perfect in every race. Felipe, I remember the first couple races of 2008, he was really poor. Having an accident in the first race in Melbourne, and then the second race in Malaysia, he just spun out from second for no reason. When, those 8 points for second place back then would have actually won him the championship. But yeah, if you look at most of 2008, Felipe Massa got the best he could out of his car. With Lando, if you look at the races, if you look since the start of the European season, there's not been that many races where Lando has got the best out of the car. So I would say Lando's title campaign is even maybe weaker than Felipe's was, even though, I mean, Lando, I would say talent-wise, is more talented than Felipe Massa was. But if it makes any sense, his title campaign has been weaker than Felipe's. That's what I would say on that. But yeah, let's get into the teams. Just want to say quickly, make sure to keep smashing that like button. We're on 30 likes at the minute. Let's try and get up to 50 likes if we can in the next, say, 20 minutes or so. That'd be great if we could do that. But before we go on to qualifying, let's just quickly whiz through the teams and how I think they'll get on in this session. Red Bull, for me, are the favourites, not just for pole position, but I think a front row lockout. They haven't been as strong starting a weekend as we've seen this weekend. You'd have to go back probably to when they were dominating in the early part of the season, back in, Shanghai and Miami, to see the last time Red Bull started a weekend in such a strong manner. And that's why I think Red Bull will take pole and will be the best team this weekend. Sergio Perez, watch out for him. He is absolutely on one this weekend. Max Verstappen, I think even if Perez is on pole, as long as he, can qualify second, I don't think he'll care at all that Perez is on pole, as long as he is ahead of all the others. Ferrari, I hope their pace is as good as it might seem, but I don't think it is. I think Leclerc is fighting probably for third, fourth place, which, I mean, if he does qualify third, that's still a good result for Ferrari, because Ferrari, if you look at qualifying in the last few races, they haven't qualified inside the top three of the grid that many times. So a top three for Leclerc and Ferrari would be a pretty good result. I don't think it'll be third, though. As I'll get into in a moment, I'll show my predictions again. I think it'll be fourth for Leclerc on the grid. Carlos Sainz, don't expect much from him. He's never really been that quick here. For Mercedes-Benz, I think they're the slowest out of the top four teams. I just don't think they've got fundamentally the pace in the middle sector that the other three teams have. They've got a decent top speed, though, so they might be able to get maybe a P5 if they really do well in that final sector. But again, first and second sector, they just don't quite have the speed, unfortunately. McLaren, as I said earlier, the slow speed corners here and the long straights, that is why McLaren are not as quick here as they were at Monza and the races before, because of those reasons. McLaren just not quite on the pace this weekend, but they can still get a good qualifying result today. Second, third may still be possible. And for Lando Norris, he just needs to make sure he gets the absolute best out of the car. And if he qualifies behind Max, so be it. But just make sure you deliver the pace that is there. Aston Martin should, with at least Lance Stroll, be in the top 10. Fernando has been struggling a bit in the other Aston Martin. But if he does perform to the level of Stroll that we've seen Stroll performing at, then Alonso should be able to get in the top 10 himself. Racing Bulls don't look that quick, to be honest. That's not really a part of the track they look that quick in, if I'm being honest. Maybe if they have gone for a bit of a lower downforce swing, they can be quick in the final sector, but I'm not expecting much. Alpine, as someone else said in the chat, I think they might be very slow in the middle sector and the first sector because they've gone for a Monza-style wing. If that is true, then good luck to them. But I don't expect anything from Alpine here. I think they'll have both cars knocked out in Q1. Williams, I think they're a dark horse to get into Q3. Do watch out for Franco Colapinto. He's been right on the pace of his teammate this weekend. And really, it could be any of the Williams drivers getting into the top 10. Sauber, they're a bit better this weekend, but still pretty shit. And Haas, I do think will get a car in the top 10. I think Nico Hülkenberg will be the man to do it yet again. Watch out, though, for Oliver Behrman making his full debut for Haas F1. And obviously, it's his second F1 race weekend. Crashed in practice 3, should be fine for qualifying. And hopefully, he can get himself in the top 11, say 12 on the grid. But here's a reminder of what my predictions are for qualifying. I think it'll be a Red Bull front row with Perez on pole, Verstappen second, Norris third, Leclerc fourth, and then Russell, Piastri, Hamilton, Sainz, Stroll, and Hülkenberg rounding out the top 10. And a couple final things to touch on before we get into qualifying. Obviously, the championship standings. Max Verstappen is 62 points clear of Lando Norris, and that's why if he can win Verstappen this race this weekend, that could be the difference between him winning and losing the championship. Lando Norris in second, Leclerc in third, and less than 100 points now behind Verstappen. If he keeps gaining, he might become a factor. Oscar Piastri in fourth, only 20 points behind Leclerc. Carlos Sainz in fifth, Hamilton sixth, Perez in seventh, Russell eighth, Alonso still ninth, and Lance Stroll still in P10. And on the constructor side, Red Bull are just 8 points clear of McLaren. But given how quick Red Bull looked this weekend, Red Bull might be able to pull away. Ferrari, though, as you can see, they are now in the fight in the Constructors' Championship. Just 39 points off the top in third. Mercedes in fourth. They will finish there this season. Same for Aston Martin in fifth. Racing Bulls are in sixth. Haas only 6 points behind in seventh. They still need to keep up these Q3 appearances, Haas, so they can make sure they catch Racing Bulls in the championship. Alpine 8th, Williams a bit closer to Alpine in 9th, and Sauber still pointless and useless in 10th. And some stats quickly regarding the top teams before we start qualifying. Red Bull have never taken a pole position in Baku. Despite how successful they've been on race day, they have never taken pole in Baku. And their last pole position was 6 races ago in Austria. That's over 2 months ago. For Ferrari, they've been quite successful in qualifying here. Ferrari took pole position at last year's Azerbaijan Grand Prix with Charles Leclerc, and he took pole the 2 years before as well in 2022 and 2021. Ferrari have taken pole in Baku 4 times since 2016, and Ferrari's last pole was 3 races ago at Spa. Mercedes' last pole in Baku was all the way back in 2019 with Valtteri Bottas 5.5 years ago. Mercedes have taken pole in Baku 3 times since 2016. Their last pole position was 5 races ago at Silverstone. And for McLaren, of course, they've never taken pole in Baku. And McLaren, despite that, they are still the most informed team in qualifying in 2024. They have started on pole in 3 of the last 4 races. So let's get into it. As guys, qualifying has already begun. We're about 15 seconds in to qualifying. So just about got it all in on time. And I'll get the timer on screen in about half a minute for you guys. But, yeah, really looking forward to this session. And one thing I'm hoping for is not a ton of red flags. And that's one thing, actually, I forgot to let you guys know earlier, was when this session finishes, if it does finish on time, at 2 p.m. UK time, which is exactly an hour from now for me, I will have to come off the stream immediately as soon as this qualifying session does finish. And the reason that is because I have a event in real life to go to, which starts, I think, just over an hour after qualifying should finish. So, yeah. Once qualifying has finished, unfortunately, I won't be staying around to do a reaction or do a poll to ask you guys who driver of the day has been. Because like I said, I've got an event to go to. So as soon as qualifying is done with, hopefully it's done on time, then I will go straight to the end of the stream. But remember, like I said, tomorrow I'll be live for the race 2 hours before lights out at 10 a.m. UK time for the build-up. And then obviously the race starts at 12 p.m. UK time. As we're looking at Max Verstappen on the track on soft compound tyres. And, well, for qualifying here, qualifying one, the two Saubers and the two Alpines are really the cars we're looking at in terms of who should be eliminated. Definitely Zhou Guanyu. His pace has been shocking this weekend. Over a second off the pace of his teammate, he was in practice 2, and somehow Zhou still thinks he has a chance of being on the grid next year, which is remarkable. As George Russell is on the medium compound tyre for his Q1 run, and he started his first run, but he's clearly doing a warm-up lap. Or an extra warm-up lap, should I say. So we'll have to wait and see what his times are. But around this track, the medium should be half a second off the pace of the soft compound tyre. As we're looking at Lewis Hamilton, as the sun has really come out in Baku in this latter part of the day. In the very late part of summer, as a Williams there just flying past the Mercedes of Hamilton. As we're looking at Max Verstappen now, who has begun his first run in qualifying. And yeah, would you believe it, despite winning the last two races here, has he won the last two races here? Or did Perez win last year? I can't remember, to be honest. I think Perez may have won here last year. But the point I'm trying to make is, considering the success Red Bull have had here in Baku, remember they won the last 3 Azerbaijan Grand Prix, and they won here in 2017 as well. It is remarkable they've never been on pole. But just shows you how well Red Bull perform on a race day. As Yuki Tsunoda has gone to the top of the timesheets on a 1:44.5, which is very slow. Alex Albon does a 1:44.2. Remember, the best time of the weekend so far is a 1:42.5. So, yeah. Albon, Tsunoda, and the rest, they'll have to go a lot quicker if they're going to get into Q2. As we've got Pierre Gasly in 5th. As Franco Colapinto goes 3 thousandths of a second quicker than his teammate and goes quickest. Brilliant from the Argentinian, who I am impressed by every session. Oliver Behrman has gone up to 3rd. Max Verstappen goes way quicker, though, onto a 1:43.6 and goes quickest, but still, that is a second off the pace. The best pace we've seen this weekend. As Lance Stroll was in 4th. Sergio Perez now goes quickest, 0.2 of a second quicker than Verstappen, proving that he does indeed have the pace. What about Charles Leclerc, though? He comes to the lines in the purple middle sector And Leclerc, loses quite a bit in the final sector and goes second. So Leclerc in P2. Red Bull and Ferrari, really since the beginning of this ground effect era, have dominated this Grand Prix event. So it's Perez, Leclerc, Verstappen, Piastri now in 4th. Piastri 4/10 of a second off the pace. And Lando Norris goes 5th behind Piastri. As Russell on the medium goes 11th, which is actually not that bad of a lap time, to be fair, on mediums. But he will definitely have to go onto the soft compound tyre if he wants to get into Q2. Because if he stays on that tyre, he will get eliminated 100% in Q1, as we're seeing replays of cars getting very close to the exit barriers. And that's a Ferrari skipping a corner. And it's the final corner before the middle sector time beam that he skipped, did Carlos Sainz. But we've got Fernando Alonso up in 6th place. And then it's Colapinto, Albon, Lewis Hamilton on the medium compound tyre in 9th. That is a good lap time, only half a second away from the McLaren. So good lap time there for Hamilton on the medium. And then you've got Stroll in 10th. And then Behrman 11th. And then Tsunoda 12th. Russell 13th on mediums. And then Bottas 14th. And Ricardo. Where's Ricardo? Here we go. Ricardo in now 16th place. Because Nico Hülkenberg has gone up to 6th, as here comes Carlos Sainz, who goes second. Very good run there for Carlos. Again, Carlos has not really ever been that quick here. As we've got a yellow flag in sector 1, but that's briefly been cleared up. Probably someone going deep at turn 1. But, Hülkenberg is up to 7th. As Tsunoda improves up to P11. Ahead of Lewis Hamilton. So you've got Tsunoda 11th, Hamilton 12th on medium, Stroll 13th, Behrman 14th, and then Russell 15th on mediums. And the drop zone is Bottas, Ricardo, Gasly, Zhou, and Ocon. So the 2 Saubers and the 2 Alpines in the drop zone, no surprise. But Ricardo, to be fair, it's not really a surprise that he's in the drop zone. He's not been that quick this weekend. But Franco Colapinto impresses yet again by improving up to 3rd place. Only a 10th of a second behind Perez. As Behrman goes up to 11th. I told you guys, and even Nib told you guys about Colapinto. Impressed in F2, and so far in F1, he's done a great job. And I'm telling you now, if he keeps this up for the rest of the year, he'll get himself a drive at some point in F1. As Ferrari, they're moving out of the way for the McLaren of Piastri, who's on another lap. Not improved the middle sector, though. And I'm not sure Piastri is actually going to improve this lap. But Williams, I have to say, look very strong. Which, again, I am a tad surprised by. I didn't think they'd be as strong here. I mean, I know it's, long straights and all, but I thought they would struggle in the middle and first sector a bit, but they're not. As Piastri goes up to 5th, so he does have a good final sector. Lando Norris, he now goes up to 5th. As Esteban Ocon comes up from last to 15th. As George Russell in the drop zone now, but he is on an outlap and surely is on the soft compound tyre, as that is a replay of Colapinto grazing the barrier on the exit of turn 15. But it didn't stop him from going third. As here's a Haas, I think a Behrman, kicking the rear end out right before the castle section. Lucky he didn't smack that wall. With a yellow flag in sector 1. And it's double waved yellows. And it's for a Ferrari at turn 2 that's just reversed out of the escape zone, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. And I think it was Carlos Sainz. As here is Russell, who's done a good first sector on his soft compound tyres. As we've got another driver that's improved. Who is that? It is Pierre Gasly, who improves very impressively up to P10. Gasly, I have to say, has been in pretty good form in the last few races. I was very impressed with him in Zandvoort. As Leclerc goes quickest to 1:42.7. That's a lot more like it at the top. And that's 4.5 tenths quicker than Perez. As Russell's done a purple middle sector, but has he got the speed in this final sector? He's got perfect slipstream. This might put him up to P1. He got a great slipstream there and comes to the line. And no, his final sector actually was not a personal best somehow. But yeah, he goes all the way up to 2nd position. So he should be fine now to get through. Lewis Hamilton, now 15th. Obviously, he was on the medium. He's now about to finish a lap on the soft. Not a great lap, though, so far. This is probably only going to put Hamilton 6th at best, maybe even 8th or 9th. So, yeah, not a great lap for Lewis. As we've got 5 minutes to go, and actually has a very good final sector and goes 4th. So, yeah, Mercedes should be fine now to go through to Q2. As in the drop zone, with 4.5 minutes left, it is Stroll, Ocon, Bottas, Ricciardo, and Zhou. As we are looking at Daniel Ricciardo, who of course won here 7 years ago. Making me feel quite old, because I remember that race like it was yesterday. I wasn't doing a watch-along or anything for that race. It was about a year before I started doing watch-alongs. And what do you call it? I remember watching the race and just bouncing up and down like a child at what was going on in the race. It was just such a fun race because of all the chaos. And to be fair to Ricciardo, even though he does tend to win the chaotic races, his performance that day was truly special. And that year, he was, without a doubt, one of the best drivers in the world back then. Not quite the case at the minute, but if he can get himself out the drop zone, he'll be happy. And he has done a brilliant middle sector, nearly a second up on his teammate Tsunoda, who's 15th. This lap, if he gets a good enough speed in this final sector, might just be enough for Ricciardo to go to Q2. Here he comes to the line, and he goes P7. I think that might just be enough. Brilliant lap from Ricciardo, performing under pressure. As Tsunoda responds to his teammate and does a purple middle sector. So this track is really ramping up in terms of grip. It's getting quicker and quicker, second by second. As here comes Tsunoda to the line. As Tsunoda goes 4th. And that might be enough to get both Racing Bulls into Q2, but still, a couple minutes to go, and a lot of drivers out there still are on their outlaps as Valtteri Bottas improves up to P10. Bottas, of course, this is one of his best tracks, and if he can get into Q2 here, I think he'll be very happy because he knows that car is absolute rubbish. And the driver at risk now, Pierre Gasly, and hold on, I've got the slightly wrong order here because Alex Albon is actually in 13th, and it's Fernando Alonso who is in the drop zone in 16th place. Oliver Behrman in 17th and Stroll 18th. Aston Martin in massive trouble, which I was not expecting. But there is still one final run to go. But remember, it's a street track, and if there's a yellow flag at the wrong time, you will be fucked. As Max Verstappen here begins his final lap of Q1. And for Max, he needs to at least go quicker than Perez with this lap for his own confidence. As he exits turn 2. Yellow flag in sector 2. And it's at... Where is it at? It's... I think just... And now there's a green flag. I think it was just after the castle section, I think. That yellow flag. Thank God there wasn't a crash there, because that would have been Q1 over and done with. We have Verstappen, not a great first sector, quarter of a second off the pace. And it's an Alpine. I think an Alpine's hit the wall. Don't know what Alpine that was. I didn't get a good enough look. But an Alpine there has hit the wall and broken its suspension, and they're just trying to slowly get back to the pits. As Albon goes second for Williams and Colapinto goes third. That is definitely good enough for Williams to get through. As Hulkenberg goes up to third. Massive improvement from the drivers now. So checkered flags now fallen. These are your final laps. Who will get eliminated? As Behrman goes up to 9th. I'm not sure if that's going to be enough. Alonso goes 10th. I'm not sure if that's enough either. As Max Verstappen in the drop zone now, but surely not for long. And no, he goes third. He is in to Q2. As Stroll goes up to P9. And Gasly goes up to third. What a lap by Pierre Gasly. That is a stonking lap, and that puts Lando Norris now in the drop zone. Yellow flag in Sector 3. How is there a yellow flag in Sector 3? It's all flat out. As Oscar Piastri was in the drop zone, he's now P4. It's now a green flag. Did that yellow flag affect anyone? As Lando Norris, is that Lando Norris? He's backed off. And Lando Norris is still in the drop zone and he's out. Lando Norris is out in Q1. That yellow flag, it may have been him that caused it. As Lewis Hamilton goes 5th. Carlos Sainz goes 12th. And let me just wait for all the cars to come over the line as Zhou goes up to 19th. And yet, Lando Norris is out in Q1 in 17th place. And that may very well be championship over for Lando. And you cannot... And let's just, hold on, let's just see a replay. And did he make a mistake? Yeah, he did. He straddled the curb on the exit of the final real corner before you go flat out all the way to the finish line. And then, I don't know if he then backed off because of a yellow flag or he backed off because he didn't know he was going to improve anymore. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, is Lando Norris is out in 17th place. And if Max Verstappen can qualify, up in the top 2 or whatever, then Lando Norris, his championship bid is surely done at this point. But let's go through. Now Q1 is over and done with. Let's go through who is in to the second part of qualifying. Charles Leclerc, Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly. What an effort from him. He was definitely the star of Q1. Piastri, Hamilton, Verstappen, Hulkenberg, Colapinto, Russell, Perez, Tsunoda, Sainz, Stroll, Behrman and Alonso. And knocked out in Q1, Daniel Ricciardo, Lando Norris, Valtteri Bottas, Zhou Guanyu, and Esteban Ocon. Oh dear for Lando Norris. Yet again, he has made a mistake at a critical time, and it's cost him. And that is the story of his season when it comes to the championship and, whether he could have done this or that. And the answer is, yes, he could have done a lot of things this season. And that's just another race weekend where Lando could have done more. If he doesn't make that mistake, then, yeah. Nib in the chat saying, "Warra team orders for you, Porris." But yeah, McLaren don't need to worry about team orders now, of course, because they've only got one car in the fight now. And Lando, from 17th, he is going to need at least a couple safety cars if he is going to be on the podium tomorrow. If there isn't, if there's only one safety car, say at the start of the race, then I think the best you're going to see from Lando tomorrow is probably 7th or 8th place. And that's why I say if Max can win tomorrow and Lando finishes 7th or 8th, that's a big gain of points for Max. Big enough that it ends the championship battle. Unless Max then has a DNF in Singapore or something. Francisco saying Norris is simply not good enough to challenge, end of. Yeah. As we're seeing him on the Sky broadcast now, looking at the TV, and he looks just absolutely fed up. But it's his own fault. He has once again cracked under pressure. And the thing is, if you're going to be a top driver, that's the one thing you don't want to have on your reputation, is being the guy who cracks under pressure. Because all the other drivers, your rivals, they take that into consideration. And they know that, yeah, you're quick, but if they put you under pressure, you'll crack. And you don't want to be known as that guy. And Lando is that guy. He's the guy who's super quick but cracks under pressure. He is Sebastian Vettel from the second half of 2018. That's what he is. Whether he is that for the rest of his career, who knows? I think there's a decent chance he could be. Because, I don't really see, unless he gets a psychologist to help him, because he's talked about how before qualifying in the race he gets really nervous. Very, very, very nervous. Unless he gets some sort of help from a psychologist, I have no idea how Lando could improve on this. And if he can't improve on it, then this is always going to be the thing with him is, yeah, super quick, but he cracks under pressure. He's not the guy. And again, you don't want to be known as that because it can tarnish your reputation. Look at Sebastian Vettel. That massively tarnished his reputation in the last couple years of his Ferrari career. He became known as the guy who cracks under pressure and spins a lot. That's what's happening to Lando. But it's all of his own making. But anyway, Q2 has begun. And I'll sync up the timer in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. And there you go. 14 minutes remain in Q2. So yeah, what in terms of the championship, what this session is about now is Max Verstappen maximizing, no pun intended, the damage of Lando qualifying 17th. And he doesn't necessarily have to get on pole, does Max. I think as long as he gets on the front row, and preferably for him, if it's Perez on pole, I think he'll be very happy with that. As we're looking at someone who could upset Red Bull's day. And it is Charles Leclerc, who's been super quick here. He's taken 3 pole positions in a row in Baku, but still hasn't won here. Probably could have won here in 2022. It's going to be close, that race, until his engine blew up. Last year, didn't have a chance. 2021 didn't have a chance because the car just wasn't quick enough. But if the car is truly quick enough tomorrow, and if he gets pole today, there's no reason why Leclerc cannot win here in Baku and take his 2nd consecutive win of 2024. And maybe can start up his championship bid. As Leclerc into the castle section, a place he knows all too well. We all remember that day in Baku. God, what a session that was. That qualifying session back then lasted, I think it was like an hour longer than it actually was supposed to. It was like a 2.5 hour session. It was so long, it almost got too dark at the end of the session. It was like half an hour or so before sundown or something. It was ridiculous that day. I think we had at least 3 red flags. But thankfully, no red flags so far. As here comes Charles Leclerc down the pit straight. And he does a 1:43.4, which is 0.7 of a second slower than he went in Q1. So clearly he's on a scrubbed set of tyres. Carlos Sainz, his teammate, though, goes quicker. Ferrari do tend to use old tyres for their first run in Q2. George Russell, though, clearly isn't, because he's gone quickest on a 1:42.7. Still slower, though, than what he did in not Q1, in practice 3. Oscar Piastri, though, matches the best time of the weekend, a 1:42.5. Lewis Hamilton goes up to 5th. So it's Piastri, Russell, Sainz, Albon, and then Hamilton, Leclerc, and then Hülkenberg and Colapinto. Only 8 drivers on the board so far. Max Verstappen, what a middle sector. Half a second up on Piastri as Behrman goes up to 3rd. What a lap by him. And Verstappen, as he got the speed down the straight to go P1 comfortably. And yes, he does. 5.5 tenths clear. Max Verstappen on a 1:42.0 goes quickest, and Sergio Perez goes 0.2 of a second slower in 2nd. Red Bull, once again, rolling the way. As is a replay of Piastri, who's currently 3rd. Getting a bit close to the exit barrier of 15. May have grazed it. Yeah, he did, but he grazed the softer part of the barrier. But, yeah, for Piastri, with Lando now out, it's going to be hard for Oscar because, I mean, Ferrari are looking decently quick. So I think with Oscar, as long as he can qualify, say, fourth or fifth, I think would be good enough. Because, I mean, Leclerc, now that Norris is out, I think Leclerc has definitely got his eyes on a top three here. So, yeah, I think Piastri, his aim has got to be to beat the two Mercedes and Sainz. And if Piastri can start fourth, that's not a bad result. I mean, McLaren should have some good race pace tomorrow. So it's not the end of the world if Piastri is fourth on the grid or fifth on the grid. As here is Lance Stroll about to complete a lap. We've also got Alonso 12th and then Gasly 13th, Tsunoda 14th. Gasly, what a day he's having. Lance Stroll stays 15th, poor lap from him. I did want to talk about Gasly. By the way, shout out Oliver Behrman up in 5th. What a lap by him. And Albon as well in 7th. But I wanted to shout out Gasly, not just for what he did in Q1, but Gasly, as of late, he's been really good, I think. But as well, we have to remember he is also very quick at this Baku track. 3 years ago in 2021, he was actually the quickest man in the first two sectors in Q3 and was heading for pole position, but then had no slipstream in the final sector and he lost all the time he gained on the top three in that final sector, and he ended up, I think, 4th or 5th on the grid. So Pierre Gasly, super quick driver around this track, and he's showing it once again. But yeah, that weekend I remember he was on fire and ended up on the podium. I think that was the only podium he had that year. As we're looking here at a Ferrari who is starting a lap on fresh tyres this time. And I believe it's Carlos Sainz. And it is the Spaniard. And on fresh tyres, I think Carlos probably will go, if he don't make a mistake, he'll probably go up to 3rd with this lap. As he's on his way now up to turn 3. And yeah, car handling all good from Carlos's point of view. And with Ferrari, I mean, since we started coming to Baku, they've been the most successful team in qualifying here in Baku. They've had 4 pole positions. They've took pole in, what is it? I think 4 of the last 5 races here in Baku, Ferrari have been on pole. Eventually, they have to turn that into a win. And will it be this weekend? As Leclerc goes a 10th quicker than Verstappen in Sector 1. But yeah, eventually they've got to turn this into a win. All these pole positions here in Baku. And if Leclerc, again, if he wins this weekend and Max, is second, then maybe Leclerc can have an eye on maybe hunting Max down. Given the form Leclerc and Ferrari are in, you'd certainly trust them a bit more. Which is weird to say, trusting Ferrari, but it's a new era at the Scuderia as Leclerc does a super middle sector, nearly 4/10 up on Verstappen, as Sainz indeed goes 3rd. But this lap from Leclerc, this is going to surely take him to the top. As he belts down the straight, the finish line in sight. What's the lap time? No, he doesn't have a personal best in the final sector. And by 0.014 of a second, he misses out on going quickest. So there you go. Or, sorry, by 0.015 of a second, he misses out on going quickest, of course. But Leclerc still, great lap and up to second place. But we do have to remember that Ferrari would have had a bit better grip for that lap than Red Bull did when they did their laps at the start of Q2. So we'll see what Red Bull do in response, if they do respond. But ultimately, Q3 for those teams is what is where it matters. And you'd have to say, at the minute, that, yeah, it's Red Bull versus Ferrari with Norris out of play. It's, yeah, Red Bull versus Ferrari if there is going to be a fight for pole position between two separate teams, because Piastri has... He's had decent pace this weekend, Piastri, but he's not really been looking like a contender for pole position. And it's not really his fault, because McLaren just haven't been that quick this weekend. Like I said, the track layout just isn't suiting their car. And they're just not enjoying this track as well as the others we've recently been to. So, yeah, if there is going to be a battle between two separate teams, yeah, I'd say at this point, it'll be Red Bull versus Ferrari. But I still am sticking with a Red Bull front row. And what a time for Red Bull to respond to the pressure and pace recently of McLaren. If Max, like I said, if he can win this weekend, then that is pretty much game, set, match for the Drivers' Championship, unless Max starts having DNFs. As here is George Russell on his final lap of Q2. Russell should be able to get through as long as he don't make a mistake. Mercedes proving what I said coming into qualifying, that they are the slowest of the front four teams. And the reason that is because they just don't have fundamentally that good a pace in slow corners compared to the other three teams. And the thing with Mercedes is their real improvement this season has been in those higher speed corners. That's why, for example, at Silverstone, they were just so strong. And obviously, you know, other tracks like Hungary, Spa. But yeah, here, they're just, you know, there's those types of corners you get at those tracks are not at this one. Which is why Mercedes and McLaren are just not on the pace that you would maybe expect. And that allows Red Bull and Ferrari to do their thing. As Russell, out of the final proper corner, bit of movement on the rear end, which wouldn't have helped, but he gets on with it as Pierre Gasly, with his final run, puts it up to 7th place. Can he somehow get into Q3 as Alex Albon now goes 7th? Russell goes up to 4th. As Tsunoda is up to 8th. Lewis Hamilton now in the drop zone. Not for long, though, as Lewis Hamilton goes 7th, but he's still at risk for now, Hamilton. That's not the greatest lap in the world. Hulkenberg has done a lap time and stayed in 12th. So Hulkenberg disappointing end there. And he is out. Lance Stroll only 13th. Poor effort from him. Franco Colapinto goes up to 5th. What a lap. As Behrman up to 10th as he sneaked through. No, he hasn't, because Fernando Alonso now goes up to 5th. And now we wait to see Max Verstappen, but Franco Colapinto has made it into Q3. What an effort by the young Argentine, and Argentinians everywhere will be going crazy As Max Verstappen finishes his lap and he doesn't improve, so thankfully he doesn't waste. Well, yeah, he wastes a set of tyres, even though you don't go any quicker. But there you go. Both Williamses into Q3. What an effort by them. And Franco Colapinto. Wow. I wasn't sure he was going to be that quick this weekend because, I mean, Monza, he did well, but I thought that was because, you know, he's got a lot of experience around Monza. A lot of the young drivers do. But to come here and do what he's doing here in Baku is something quite special. But that, guys, is Q2 over and done with. And these are the drivers on their way to the top 10 shootout. Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Sergio Perez, George Russell, Fernando Alonso, Franco Colapinto, for the first time in his career, is in to Q3. Carlos Sainz, Oscar Piastri, Lewis Hamilton, and Alexander Albon, both Williams is in. And knocked out in Q2, Oliver Behrman, still a good effort from him, Yuki Tsunoda, Pierre Gasly, Nico Hülkenberg, and Lance Stroll. Yeah, good effort from Behrman as well, out-qualifying Hülkenberg in his first, you know, head-to-head at Haas. That's a great effort. But now it all comes down to Q3 and the shootout. And we've had a couple great ends to qualifying here before. Let's hope we get another great one. Nib saying Colahimto. Yeah, that just... Like I said, because I've got somewhere to go when this session finishes, I will be coming off stream right as soon as qualifying finishes. But if I was to do a driver of the day vote, he definitely would be in it, and he probably would be winning it, if I'm being honest. And all the people online that moaned, oh, why did James Vowles put Franco in the car? Why not Mick Schumacher? This is why. And he said in the simulator, the data they got from Franco was really good and really encouraging. And this is why they put him in the car, because they knew he could do this. And he's doing it. So give James Vowles the credit he deserves. But in a couple minutes, guys, I will I will be finishing up the poll in the live chat where I've asked you guys, who do you think will take pole in Baku? Obviously, one of the options in the poll has already been knocked out. So Lando Norris, you can forget. Will it be Sergio Perez, Max Verstappen, or Charles Leclerc? I'm still going to stick with Perez because he is very quick at this track. Red Bull have got, I think, the best car here. And yeah, I think Perez, I think he's still got the potential to get ahead of Max. I wouldn't be surprised if Max was on pole, but I'm still going to stick with Perez. But let me know, guys. Do you agree? Disagree? As we are very soon about to find out who will take pole for tomorrow's Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Remember, I'll be live tomorrow 2 hours before lights out at 10 a.m. UK time to build up to the race. And of course, Nib, who's in the chat, he'll join me for the race watch along. And we'll take you through the 51 laps in Baku, which, to be fair, might not be that exciting if it's a Red Bull front row, but we've seen quite a lot of interesting races this year, so you never know. But yeah, that'll be coming up for you tomorrow live. And then, of course, on Monday, I'll be uploading my review of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix weekend. And then just a reminder, next weekend in Singapore, I'll be doing a qualifying watch-along for Singapore, but I will not be doing a race watch-along. Therefore, yeah, instead of doing a race watch along, I'll then do a podcast on the Monday after reviewing the Singapore Grand Prix. We've just seen a replay here of what happened to Norris. So Lando, on that final proper corner, he straddled the exit curb, and then he saw the Alpine there and slowed down. But I don't actually know if there was I don't think there was a yellow flag, because there was green flashing. But Lando decided to slow down. If I was Lando, I would have took the risk and just gone flat out to the finish line. Because I think he may have got away with it. But he decided to slow down. So, yeah, not quite sure about that from Lando, but yeah. As Leclerc we're seeing in the garage, Piastri as well, as they're preparing for this battle for pole. And I would say the battle for pole is between three drivers: Verstappen, Perez, Leclerc, as it was, I think, last year, really. Yeah, I just can't see Sainz, Piastri, or Russell able to get into this. But it'll be interesting to see where those end up, because it'll be crucial for the race tomorrow. But yeah, they're showing a replay again of Norris, and there was a green light flashing, but I don't know if maybe a yellow flag came up on his dashboard, and that's why he slowed down. But if I was Lando, I would have took the risk, and I would have gone flat out to the finish line, and then let the stewards deal with it later. But he decided to slow down. As the session has now begun, as we enter the final 12 minutes of qualifying. As there is Ferrari ready to release the Spaniard Carlos Sainz. There is Fernando Alonso in his garage. Alonso, good job to out-qualify Stroll, who honestly looked quicker than him this weekend. But with Fernando, given that Norris got eliminated, if Fernando can qualify 8th, then I think Aston Martin would be pretty happy with that. Be on the 4th row of the grid here. As cars now getting released into the pit lane. And there you go. Timer on screen. 11 minutes remain in qualifying, as they all now pile onto track. And we'll see not just who produces the best lap, but who also gets a bit lucky. Because again, in that final sector, if you can grab a bit of a slipstream, could be the difference between pole or 4th or 5th on the grid. It really could. Even though these cars, they don't gain as much from a slipstream as the cars from, say, 2021 did, it still is a factor, no doubt about it. Let me just quickly, though, finish up this poll in the chat. 275 votes. And I asked you guys, who do you think will take pole position in Baku? And 38% of you went for Charles Leclerc, interestingly. 24% went for Verstappen. 19% went for Norris. Of course, he's out. 17% went for Perez. Well, I hope you guys are right. I hope Leclerc is the one who gets pole, purely to make tomorrow's race more interesting. Because I think if Red Bull get the front row, or even on pole, I think Red Bull might run away with it tomorrow. As we're looking at Leclerc, who is looking for his 4th consecutive pole position in Baku. He rules the streets when it comes to qualifying. And the drivers know, especially Max, he knows that there is only one driver to be feared out here, and it is Leclerc. He's the only one who can pull out all the stops. As here it is, George Russell begins his first attempt at pole position. Russell, I don't think has ever qualified in the top 5 here. But this is probably the most competitive this weekend. Mercedes have been here in Baku in probably 3 years. But still, they're not that competitive. As Russell through turn 4-5. First sector, a 36.0. Lewis Hamilton about to come out to that sector. We'll see what he does. 36.283. So poor start to the lap for Lewis Hamilton. As Piastri does a purple first sector. So good start for him. Like I said, for Piastri, I think at least 4th place is what he needs to aim for here. As Russell down into turn 15 gets it absolutely bang on. This looks a good lap from Russell in terms of his driving. It's just the lap time isn't there because the car isn't quick enough. But Russell's giving it everything he's got. And he's definitely going quicker than Hamilton by quite a bit on this lap. But Piastri behind going quicker than both Mercedes cars by quite a bit. But here comes Russell to the line. 141.9. That's definitely going to be beaten later on. Hamilton goes half a second slower. Awful lap by Lewis Hamilton. And here comes Piastri. A 10th and a bit quicker than Russell. And Piastri goes quickest. Charles Leclerc goes a couple tenths of a second quicker onto a 1:41.6. Carlos Sainz goes second. Just ahead of Piastri. Great lap from Carlos. Alonso up to 6th. And here comes Max Verstappen. Can he get onto provisional pole? No, he can't. 6.5 tenths down and only 5th for Verstappen. Albon goes 7th. Here comes Colapinto, who goes up to 8th ahead of Alonso. Williams on the 4th row of the grid in the minute. Here's Perez. He only goes 5th. Well, yeah. What has happened to Red Bull? I know Red Bull can go quicker than that because, I mean, Max did a 42, and yeah, Max made a mistake at turn 17. The final proper corner before you go flat out to the line. Massive oversteer moment. May have even damaged his floor. I hope he hasn't. But, what was I going to say? Yeah, Max, without that mistake, who knows where he could have gone? He could have gone P1 without that mistake. But at the minute, with 1 run to go in qualifying, it is a Ferrari front row. Leclerc from Sainz and Piastri 3rd, Russell 4th, Perez 5th, Verstappen 6th, Hamilton 7th. Awful lap by Hamilton. And Lewis asking, how far behind am I? And he's been told, and he says, come on, guys, get those temperatures up. As he's been told that he's 8.5 tenths behind Leclerc. And he's, well, half a second behind his own teammate. The Red Bull, no doubt, can go quicker than that. Because Perez matched what Max did in Q2, 42.0. And Max went, 2 tenths of a second slower than what he did in Q2. So Red Bull definitely can go quicker. And if they don't make a mistake on their final laps, and there's no yellow flags or red flags, the Red Bull will improve on 5th and 6th. But will they improve enough to take pole? That's the $1 million question we're going to find out in these final 4 minutes. Nib saying Oscar was on used tyres. I'd be amazed if that's true, because he's only 0.2 of a second away from pole position. But yeah, 3.5 minutes left. And, well, if Piastri did do that time on used tyres, then maybe he's a contender as well. But I still think, as Piastri now goes on to an outlap, I still think it's Ferrari versus Red Bull, as the cars now filter onto the racetrack. He was on used tyres according to Karun. Okay, well, no matter what, we'll see what happens on this final runners. Oh no! The Williams has left the pits with its airbox still attached. And Albon has stopped on the track. And that is going to cause a red flag. Unless the marshals pull it off and he just drives off, which I hope they do. Please don't be a red flag for this. What a bunch of fucking idiots Williams are. And Albon is trying to remove it himself, but there's still cars behind him, which I think is maybe why the marshals are not coming to him. And now he's just put it on the side of his car. And we've got 2 minutes to go in Q3. And the marshal, I think, has just removed it. But for Williams, how do you fuck up like that? That is, pretty bad fuck up. But Albon, I believe, has now left that area. And we're all good. So thankfully, no red flag. But George Russell starts his final attempt at pole position in Baku. To be fair, if he qualified 4th where he is now, I think he'd be pretty satisfied with that. But there is still maybe more on offer. DRS open, down to turn 3. Hits the apex beautifully. As, let's see what his first sector is. And it's not a personal best, as Albon has been noted for an unsafe release. No surprise. Lewis Hamilton does a personal best first sector, but it's still not as good as what Russell did in the first sector on his first lap. Piastri, couple hundredths inside Leclerc on the first sector. But for him, it's all about the middle sector if he wants to get pole. As Russell into turn 15. Car slightly slides towards the exit, but all good. And does a personal best middle sector. Albon will be under investigation after the session now for an unsafe release. Hopefully doesn't get a penalty for the team's clear mishap. But Albon has missed the flag. So Albon stays in 8th place. So well done, Williams. Piastri does a fastest middle sector, but only by 0.03 of a second. It's going to be super close as Russell stays in 4th. He might fall down a bit here as Lewis Hamilton, purple final sector, but stays in P7 where I thought he'd qualify. Here comes Piastri. only second. He just didn't have the pace in the final sector. And here is Carlos Sainz, who stays third. Leclerc's got a purple middle sector. Can he get pole? It's another quarter of a second. And for now, he is 3/10 ahead of Piastri as Max has not done a personal best in either the first or second sector. This is a disaster for Max. But for Perez, he has done a purple first sector, so it's not all over. As Alonso is 8th, Colapinto goes ahead of his teammate, as Verstappen only goes 5th. Disaster for Verstappen, and Perez only goes 4th. And it's celebrations yet again at the Scuderia as Charles Leclerc, for the 4th year running, takes pole position in Baku. Red Bull, major fuck up there. Pole position was an offer, and they delivered 2 stonking, or not stonking, honking laps. Did both Red Bull drivers. I don't know if it was a tyre temperature issue or what, but Red Bull, that was a shocking performance. But Leclerc, 4 years in a row on pole. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he wins tomorrow. And you got to think, with all these poles in Baku, eventually he's got to turn one of them into a win. Oscar Piastri second. Brilliant effort from him. And if McLaren have got strong race pace, there's no reason why Piastri can't get the win tomorrow that he should have got 2 weeks ago. Carlos Sainz third. Brilliant day for Ferrari. Perez 4th. Russell 5th. Verstappen 6th. Horrible day for Red Bull. Hamilton 7th. Alonso 8th. Colapinto 9th. What an effort by him. Albon in 10th. Here's a replay of Piastri. Oversteer moment on the exit of turn 15. And he did clip the wall. Whether that cost him enough time to get pole, who knows. But that's your top 10. And then the rest of the field. Behrman 11th. Tsunoda 12th. Gasly 13th. Hulkenberg 14th. Stroll 15th. Ricciardo 16th. Norris 17th. Bottas 18th. Zhou 19th. And Esteban Ocon will line up at the very back of the grid. But guys, like I said, in just over an hour, I've got an event that I need to be at. So I need to come off stream. So sorry, I won't be sticking around to do a reaction or do a driver of the day vote in the chat. Sorry about that. But of course, I will be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. UK time, 2 hours before lights out, for the race watch along for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, where we'll find out whether it'll be Ferrari, McLaren, or Red Bull, or even Mercedes winning in Baku. Make sure to join us for that. Again, live 2 hours before lights out at 10 a.m. UK time. Before you go, make sure to smash the like button. Really helps the channel. Make sure to subscribe for more content like this. Make sure to join our Discord server. Link in the chat and in the description for that. But guys, until my race watch along tomorrow at 10 a.m. UK time, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.